It's no shocker that Donald Trump is one of the most polarizing presidents of our time, with many taking issue with his fashy tendencies, especially recently. However, the people that love him really love him, as Trump has been able to build himself a dedicated and loyal constituency. How did this happen? During his 2016 election campaign, Trump sold himself to be an outsider, somebody who wasn't some stuffy, corrupt Washington elite, but as someone who was going to drain the swamp. He claimed to care about working class people and promised to make America great again. However, his actual policies tell a different story. Take for example his tax plan, which gave substantial tax cuts to corporations. In this plan, the effective tax rate for corporations dropped from 35% to 21%. Worse yet, when you account for generous tax benefits granted to the ultra-rich, the average tax rate for corporations actually went from 23.4% all the way down to 12.1%. That's almost a 50% slash to corporate tax rates. Meanwhile, individuals saw their tax rates decrease from 9.6% to 9.2%, a whopping 0.4 decrease. According to the GOP, they argued that this tax plan would actually benefit the working class because an increase in capital stock would lead to higher wages. Now, this might be the case if corporations actually cared about raising wages, but the numbers say otherwise. Overall, wages for full-time working class people only slightly increased by $1,248 annually. If that's not damning enough, how about the fact that the 400 richest families in America are paying a lower overall tax rate compared to the middle class? Here's the real nail in the coffin though. Remember the whole drain the swamp thing? Well, you don't have to look any further than the members of Trump's administration to see that it reeks with corporate baloney. Between people like ex-CIA Director Mike Pompeo and ex-lobbyist Chad Wolf, Trump didn't drain the swamp. He bathed in it. Now, this construction of a fake populist personality isn't exclusive to Trump, as the so-called opposition party is just as guilty of it. Trump's predecessor, Barack Obama, was elected twice as president between 2008 to 2016. During both his campaigns, Obama was hamming up the idea that, under his administration, we would see serious change in how this country works and more support for the working class. Then the Occupy Wall Street movement happened, and thousands of protesters were arrested while Obama gave a huge bailout to Wall Street criminals. So yeah, some working class hero, huh? There was also major support for him to become the first black president in American history. See, while Trump's facade was populism, Obama's was that plus identity politics. Now, whether or not Obama's administration was better than Trump's or vice versa is not the point of this video, but rather it's an examination of what politicians say in order to make you feel like they care about you. More times than not, this type of manipulation is achieved through empty promises and playing the identity game. When it comes to the latest examples of empty language and substanceless platitudes, look no further than the recent COVID-19 pandemic and how both Democrats and Republicans really treated the working class they claim to care so deeply about. One of the largest acts passed during the whole pandemic was the HEROES Act, a $3 trillion relief package designed to take care of working class citizens, or at least that's what the title implied. The HEROES Act included benefits such as another single $1,200 check for some people, a $600 weekly unemployment check for those who could properly qualify, temporary student loan forgiveness, $100 billion for rental assistance for tenants who could be properly vouched for, and lastly, a $200 billion HEROES Fund that would provide hazard pay to some essential workers. Now, let's see what was left out of the act. Progressives in the DNC had strongly advocated for a recurring $2,000 a month stimulus check for up to 12 months, but that was left out. There was also the idea of the Paycheck Guarantee Act, which would have covered 100% of a worker's paycheck while they were unable to work during shutdowns. Oh, but that didn't make it in either. Lastly, there was the proposal of implementing automatic stabilizers, which would have tied the extension of federal aid to the severity of the pandemic over its fluctuation. Can you guess whether that made it in or not? If your answer is yes, then you haven't been paying attention, silly goose. Funny enough, Trump and the GOP had nothing to do with this bill. Hell, the GOP wasn't even interested in writing the damn thing to begin with. No, it was Democratic Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, Trump's so-called adversary, who made the few progressives in the House back down with all their scary populist policies. She traded substantive working-class policies for empty hero platitudes. I mean, you'd think that when this level of carelessness towards average people is so present within both parties, people wouldn't bother aligning themselves with either. So why do they? Politics, like most things in America, are flashy, bloated, and begging for your attention. This is why presidential campaigns in America are so costly, running upwards of $100 million most of the time. A majority of these large-scale budgets goes towards securing advertising, be it on TV, social media, billboards, you name it. This means that large swaths of the population are sucked up in this theatrical political showdown, in this us versus them game. These political campaigns end up creating drastic forms of sectarianism among the working class. All of a sudden, solidarity is thrown out for a blue or red tie, and people become loyal to their party the same way they become loyal to a sports team. The importance placed on party loyalty is similar to people that concern themselves too heavily with the identity politics side of things. People who, for example, feel that having a black woman become vice president for the first time in history is enough to outweigh all the horrible shit that same black woman has done to poor black people in the past. Now, that isn't to say that identity politics is not worth paying attention to at all. It's actually quite important to have a diverse government that can represent all types of people from all walks of life. It just shouldn't be the sole factor where you place all your chips. Having a diverse government means nothing if the only thing they serve is capital interest. Which brings us to our final question. Why do politicians talk a big populist game but never actually comply to populist demands? Well, you can ask groups like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Realtors, the Blue Cross and Blue Shield, or just about any of the other top lobbyist groups that pump money straight into DC. The goal of these lobbyists and super PACs is to essentially donate loads of money to politicians they like, and in return, the politicians shape up legislation on their behalf. Notice how the top 3 spenders are lobbies focused in business commerce, real estate, and health insurance, some of the biggest sources of capital gain in this country. The corporate class scratches the politicians' back and vice versa, all the while leaving breadcrumbs for the rest of the common people, giving them just enough to not get too rowdy. Even though we voted these people based on their promises, it's these corporate interests that really dictate the government policy. But let's not end on a depressing note, as there are some ways in which we the people can look beyond what our preferred candidate has to say at a campaign rally. First off, consuming more independent media that is less likely to be susceptible to corporate influence is a good start. There's also this great website called govtrack.us that allows anyone to search up the voting histories of any present or former member of Congress. This one is especially important if the person running for office is a career politician. And lastly, there's always the option to break away from the duopoly we have now and organize a party dedicated explicitly to uplifting the working class, along with creating our own local organizations. The most important thing to remember is that politicians are trying to win your vote, and they will tell you whatever sounds good to make that happen, even if they don't really mean it. So instead of trusting their words, really try to dig into the material actions they've committed in the past and present, and see where they really stand. Thanks for watching.